They said love fades with time, but for Franca, it wasn't time, it was absence. She was a devoted wife, a committed mother, and a tireless nurse. But in all the years of putting everyone first, her patients, her colleagues, her children, she never realized how distant her own home had become until it crumbled right before her eyes. Franca and James had moved to Toronto, Canada, 5 years earlier in pursuit of better opportunities. James, a sharp-minded businessman, quickly rose to prominence, building his company from a small logistics firm into a reputable empire. Franca, on the other hand, had always wanted to help people. Nursing had been her calling long before love ever found her. Unfortunately, in chasing their individual dreams, the space between them widened like a river in spring thaw. To help manage the household, they hired Annabelle, a young woman from Nova Scotia with a quiet voice and attentive hands. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for their children with diligence that Franca respected. Annabelle became a fixture in their home, trusted and almost invisible, until she wasn't. Franca's schedule was brutal. Double shifts. Emergency calls. Night rounds. There were days she wouldn't see her children awake, let alone sit down for dinner with her husband. She assumed James understood. After all, he had his empire to run too. But James was lonely. Power and prestige didn't quiet the silence that echoed in their mansion every night. The warmth that once lived between him and Franca had become cold protocol, dinners in the fridge, don't forget the PTA meeting, good night. There was no room for affection, no pause for vulnerability. And where silence dwells, temptation listens. It was a Thursday afternoon, hotter than most in Toronto. Franca had just finished a grueling shift, 3 hours overtime. Her head pounded, her feet ached, and all she wanted was her bed. But a forgotten badge forced her to return home midday, something she never did. She didn't call. She just walked in. The front door creaked open. Silence. Then murmurs. She walked through the hallway, her heels clicking against the polished wood floors, following the low tones and muffled giggles. Her brows furrowed as she reached the living room and paused. There they were, James and Annabelle, tangled in an intimate embrace on the very couch she had picked for their anniversary. His hand cradled the maid's face with a familiarity that froze Franca's breath. Their laughter stopped as their eyes met hers. Time stood still. James stammered. Annabelle leapt up. But Franca didn't speak. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood, staring, her heart beating a war drum in her chest. Finally, in a voice colder than the Canadian winter, she whispered, "Get out of my house." James tried to approach her. "Franca, it's not. Don't." Her hand rose like a wall. "Just don't." She turned to Annabelle, trembling but controlled. "I opened my home to you. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me?" Annabelle's lips quivered. She said nothing. Franca turned away and climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Upstairs, she collapsed into their bedroom, now a chamber of betrayal. She couldn't unsee it. Her sanctuary, her family, shattered in a single glance. For a woman who had spent her life patching wounds, this one was too deep to heal quickly. The pain didn't scream. It simmered, quiet, sharp, unrelenting. That night, Franca didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, wondering how love so genuine could be returned with such disgrace. But by morning, she had made a decision. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't plead. And she definitely wouldn't stay silent. By morning, James found himself sitting alone in the guest room. Annabelle had already packed her things and left before dawn, escorted out by Franca without a single word. The woman who had run his household, managed their meals, and cared for their children like her own, gone, as though she had never existed. And Franca? She hadn't said another word since the moment she caught them. James had built his business empire through strategy and negotiation, but nothing in his corporate experience had prepared him for this. How do you bargain with a broken heart? How do you explain something that never should have happened? Franca, meanwhile, didn't shed a tear. She moved through the house with precision, packing her children's lunch, arranging their school schedules, and calling her shift manager to take the next few days off. But behind her calm exterior, an emotional storm brewed. She had loved James. Fiercely. Faithfully. She had stood beside him when he had nothing and believed in him before the world ever knew his name. She carried his dreams as her own while suppressing her exhaustion, always telling herself that this was just a season. A hard one, yes, but not permanent. But while she had been out saving lives, he was dismantling theirs. That afternoon, Franca sat across from James in the kitchen. The same table where they used to dream of vacations they never took. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I never meant to hurt you, he began, voice low. She let out a sharp breath, more of a laugh than a sigh. But you did. I was lonely, Franca. Her eyes flashed. You think I wasn't? You think working double shifts in trauma wards is easy? You think I didn't miss you every night I came home to silence? James swallowed hard. It wasn't planned. It just happened. No, James, she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. Cheating doesn't just happen. It's a choice. One you made. Repeatedly. He hung his head. I made a mistake. Franca leaned in. You broke a covenant. That's not a mistake, it's a decision. There was a long pause. Then she stood and walked over to the living room. From the shelf, she pulled down the framed wedding photo they'd taken in Vancouver on their 5th anniversary. They looked so happy in that image, hopeful, untouchable. She stared at it for a moment, then placed it face down on the table. I want you to leave, she said softly. James stood up, stunned. What? Franca, please. We can fix this. No, her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. You don't break something this badly and expect it to be glued back in a day. What about the kids? I'll talk to them. They'll know the truth, in a way that won't destroy them. James felt the walls closing in. For the first time, he realized what he had truly lost. It wasn't just Franca's trust, it was the heart of his home. That evening, James packed a suitcase and left quietly. No angry shouts. No slamming doors. Just silence and the echo of everything he had taken for granted. Franca stood by the upstairs window and watched his car disappear down the long driveway. Her heart trembled, but her feet remained firm. She wasn't the same woman she had been the day before. She had found her voice in the ruins. And as the sun dipped below the skyline of Toronto, Franca whispered to herself, this is not the end. Just a new beginning. The hardest part of heartbreak isn't the moment it happens, it's what comes after. It's waking up in a quiet house, brushing your teeth beside an empty sink, folding laundry that smells like memories, and explaining to your children why daddy won't be home for dinner again. Franca knew she had crossed a line the day she asked James to leave, but standing alone at the edge of her decision felt heavier than she had prepared for. Still, she held her head high. Weeks passed. The whispers began. Neighbors noticed James's absence. Church friends asked questions in hushed tones. Some pitied her. Others judged. But Franca didn't care. She wasn't interested in saving face, she was focused on saving herself. She returned to work and kept her routine tight. Her children, aged 8 and 10, leaned on her more than ever. She answered their innocent questions with age-appropriate honesty. Sometimes, adults make choices that hurt people, she told them. But no matter what, I will always be here for you. She didn't paint James as a monster, even though she had every right to. She was raising children, not recruits for bitterness. At the hospital, her colleagues noticed a new calm in her demeanor. Franca had always been efficient, but now, there was a depth to her strength. She had become a woman forged by betrayal, but not destroyed by it. One evening, she stood in her garden, the very one Annabelle used to water. The plants looked tired, neglected. Franca rolled up her sleeves and dug her hands into the soil. She needed to touch the earth. To feel something real again. With each weed she pulled, she whispered the names of her pain: betrayal, yank, disrespect, toss, shame. Gone. She was no longer hiding her wounds. She was tending to them. Meanwhile, James had moved into a service department downtown. The city lights were bright, but his world had dimmed. Business meetings came and went, but nothing filled the silence that followed him home at night. He sent messages, apologies that felt too little, too late. Franca read them, but never replied. She wasn't being cruel. She was protecting her healing. Forgiveness, she knew, wasn't a gift you rushed to deliver, it was one you gave when your soul was ready. One Saturday, James came to the house to drop off gifts for the children. Franca met him at the door. He looked tired. Older. Regret clung to him like smoke. Franca, he began, I just wanted to say. I know, she interrupted gently. But you don't have to keep saying it. He nodded, looking at the kids laughing behind her in the living room. You've done an amazing job with them. I'm doing my best, she said, voice calm but firm. There was a long silence between them. Not tense. Just real. Do you think we'll ever be okay again? He asked, eyes searching hers. Franca gave a small smile. I don't know, James. Maybe one day. But right now, I'm focused on being okay with myself. That's the only promise I can keep. And with that, she closed the door, not out of anger, but from closure. That night, she wrote in her journal. This is not the life I planned, but it's the one I have. And I will honor it. I will rise, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I am not just a woman who was betrayed. I am a woman who chose to live.